Hello, it's Wednesday evening, March the 25th, 2020. There will be a number of people from Randolph Church of Christ tuning in for the regular Bible study. We usually meet on Wednesday night, but because of the fact that coronavirus is upon us and we're practicing social distancing because of the need to respect the rules that have been laid down and the suggestions by our leaders, we thought it would be good to go ahead and have our Bible study online this way. Now, this is not our normal practice, but what we are trying to do is continue meeting in such a way that we can encourage Bible study. We appreciate you tuning in. Those of you that are studying this way, I see that there are various ones joining at this time, and we appreciate you. You can turn to the book of Job. We'll start there in just a moment. But there have been a couple of questions asked by people saying, why are you canceling services? And the fact is, we're not canceling services. We're just having them a different way. We're not stopping what we're doing. We're just trying to take care, use our wisdom as God has given us wisdom. The fact is, sometimes we lack wisdom, and in James 1:5, God said, if any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all men liberally and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. But let him ask in faith without doubting. And so when it comes to asking God for wisdom, we have to listen. The book of Proverbs says that wisdom cries in the street. And we have our leaders telling us that we do need to respect one another and keep our distance. And so since people are practicing this, we are doing this too, and we appreciate the fact that we can do it this way. God has blessed us so abundantly. And so as we open the scriptures, we turn to the book of Job, and we find a man in verse 1 of chapter 1 who was in the land of Uz, whose name was Job. And that man was blameless and upright, and one who feared God and shunned evil. Notice this is one man, and yet God takes notice of this one man, and so does Satan. The Lord said to Satan in verse 8, have you considered my servant Job, that there's none like him on the earth? What if that could be said about you? It was said in such a good thing, in such a good way about Job, because it said he was blameless and an upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil. The whole world may have been doing one thing, but God took notice of this one man who feared God and shunned evil. God said he was blameless, and God took notice of him. Well, Satan answered in verse 9. Satan answered the Lord and said, does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him, around his household, and around all that he has on every side? You've blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But now stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. Satan was so sure that Job was only worshiping God because Job was being blessed. But the Lord said to Satan in verse 12, behold, all that he has is in your power. Only do not lay a hand on his person. So Satan had to ask permission from God in order to tempt Job. Now think about that. God was in control the whole time. God allowed Job to be tempted by Satan, allowed him to be tested. But God was in control. We may think that the devil is powerful, and he is. We should not underestimate the devil. But at the same time, we shouldn't overestimate the devil. The devil is not in control. He may have this world under his sway, 1 John 5, verse 19. He has been called the God of this world, little g, 2 Corinthians 4, verse 4. But he is not as powerful as God. In fact, he has to ask permission from God. God allows people to be tempted, but God does not tempt man to sin. James chapter 1, he tells us, let no man say when he is tempted, I'm tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. But every man is tempted when he's drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished or full grown, bringeth forth death. And so the fact is that we are tempted when we're drawn away of our own lust and enticed. The devil does the enticing. But God takes notice of every person and remains in control. And this is really the point of the lesson that I want to bring to your attention tonight. That God will not allow you to be tempted above what you're able. Now, if Satan had his way, he would certainly want to tempt us beyond our ability to withstand. But he does not have that power because God has not granted it to him. In fact, we read a very wonderful verse in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 13. Here Paul says, no temptation has overtaken you, except such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape, that you may be able to bear it. Now here's the good news. Satan wanted Job to curse God to God's face. And he felt sure that if Job was deprived of his family, of his health, of his well-being, his riches, that surely he would curse God. Well, God allowed Job to be tempted far beyond what many of us have been tempted. And he was put to the test, but he never cursed God. And Job passed the test. Job is such an example to us. In James chapter 5, we're told to consider the example of Job for an example of suffering, affliction, and of patience. Job, being an Old Testament character, teaches us as we reflect back on him and his life in the New Testament. And so we see from the example of Job that Satan had to be under the authority of God before he could ever tempt Job. And that God did not allow Job to be tempted beyond what he was able. And God is no respecter of persons. So God feels that way about you too. He will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you're able. The temptations that we face are common to man, as he says here in 1 Corinthians 10:13. That means that Satan is not going to come up with something new just for you. But you're facing what your fellow man faces, and there's some comfort in that, knowing that we're not alone. Now, what is your weakness may not be my weakness, and my weakness might not be your weakness. And Satan can play toward our particular weakness. But God is in control, and God is so concerned about you that he will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you're able, but he will provide a way of escape, that you may be able to bear it. So another lesson that we can get from this is that the individual is important to God. The individual is so important to God that he will look at what you're facing, and he will not allow you to be stretched beyond your limit, but he will provide a way of escape so that you can deal with temptation. And we have a Savior, Jesus, the Son of God, that we can look to for an example. He passed the test also. And Jesus was tempted in all points as we are, and yet without sin. Hebrews 4 verse 15. So we understand as we look into the scriptures that the devil uses the lust of the eye, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. And he will work through these ways as he did with Eve in the Garden of Eden, as he did with Jesus out in the wilderness. And he meets you with these temptations. The world provides many opportunities for us to fall to the lust of the eye, the lust of the flesh, and the pride or vainglory of life. And Satan will appeal to us in such a way that we will look at the pleasure of sin and forget the consequences. There is pleasure in sin, but it's only for a season. The consequences of sin make sin not worth it. So we should look for the way of escape that we might be able to bear it. It may be that in a world where you're isolated right now, or perhaps you feel some pressure having to deal with the news that's coming to us, and you think, is God still in control? And the answer is yes. He's very much in control, and he's very much concerned about each person. There may be over 7 billion people on this planet right now, but God knows every person. For proof of this, we can look at Psalm 139, where David wrote, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thought afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. For there is not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You have hedged me behind and before, and laid your hand upon me." Now watch this. "Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain it." My wife used to teach algebra and did so for a number of years, has a degree in mathematics. I do good to balance the checkbook. I think some of that knowledge is just too high for me. I cannot attain it. But that's not what he's talking about here. He's talking about the individual care and concern that God gives him. It's knowledge that's too wonderful for him. We know even more than David did. We know about viruses. We know about all the systems of our body, our endocrine system, our skin. We know about our skeletal structure and our lymph system, our circulatory system, digestive system, and all these systems that work together to keep us alive. And there's so much to think about when you look at the universe and how God created all of that. And then you look at not only telescopically, but you go all the way microscopically, and you see so much that God has done. This knowledge is just too wonderful for us. God is concerned about the individual and about you. Notice David says, "Where can I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand will lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall fall on me, and even the night shall be light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as the day, and the darkness and the light are both alike to you. For you formed my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret, and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed, and in your book they all were written. The days fashioned for me when as yet there were none of them. Now watch this. How precious also are your thoughts to me, O God. How great is the sum of them. If I should count them, they would be more in number than the sand. When I awake, I'm still with you.